Ma adolabi jokbit lako hamgin jokbi chinabagan balan hamgonda lagan. Ajulga adolabi jinabagin heomats. Abogida alibama haji dimbin abogians. Nivi ajulgi bu mijiska jolagi sara ofan isti midkatlaken asihagans. Owala maskogit dikamzi bomi injuko bitlegents. Ijuko sawanagit igandachka Indiana alagants. Bu istit abunaga hita idibangida moment idin hitkida abunagants. Bu ayida liskit ofoligida hasyanks. Isti hadkit haka moment abida ian haladida iskinagants. Igana nigia aji wajusin heomats. Jatkik josatlansis momenhia sahobaga dikamzi fachan komidawants. Imongen davot odolabi jokbitlako hamgin jokbi jinabagan balan hokolagagan. Jatkit owala hojivgan atlach quichips. Bujuko bunagi bu igana ijagi oborkans. Jatkit ijana jagi me bomi junichkans. Ajulga odolabi oshtabagan heomats. Janini ajabgi jatki hilis hacho hojivki heomat okwihlayan hia aleji jayants. Our clothing was no longer made of cloth, but of animal hides. We ate only what we gathered or hunted. The sermons we heard told us to avoid the white people. Our leaders committed to getting rid of the white people and to honor their promise to return to the old ways. Little Warrior was a follower of my father, and he traveled with other warriors often to meetings in the Indiana Territory. On one return trip, the warriors attacked a town near the Duck River in Tennessee, and they took a white woman hostage. This outraged the Americans, who asked Colonel Hawkins, the Indian agent for the American government, to demand a response from the Creek leaders. Big Warrior, who had an agreement with the Americans, sent warriors to kill Little Warrior with the help from Gawita Chief Willem McIntosh. My father declared war on the Creeks who followed the ways of the white people. He vowed to get rid of Big Warrior and his warriors, including Little Prince, along with Willem McIntosh and all who allied with the white people. Holy Ground became a war town for the Red Stick Warriors, and the bloodshed began. Following a battle at the Burnt Corn Creek, my father and his warriors attacked Fort Mims. More than 200 white people and 100 Creeks who were friendly with the Americans died. All who followed the Red Stick uprising were under attack and being killed as the Americans retaliated. At Holy Ground, we heard of many battles across the region. American troops began the march to Holy Ground in the winter of 1813. I was 10 years old when we left in canoes on the Alabama River. We took only the clothes we were wearing. We left our holy ground behind. One group of Red Sticks escaped with us, but many broke away from my father as we went different ways. We did not eat for weeks as we ran. Our future was dark. Once a strong supporter of my father, William Weatherford, now pursued him with Choctaw warriors, including McIntosh, with the Americans. Weatherford participated in negotiating the surrender of those in the woods around Holy Ground who remained loyal to the Red Stick movement. We continued our journey to Florida, then under Spanish rule. Rumors of my father's death preceded us. Many of us were very sick when we reached the swamps near Pensacola in June of 1814. The Spanish governor and the British heard of us and sent friendly Seminoles to find us. We were hiding and starving in the swamps. My father sailed ahead of us to the post on the Apalachicola River. We walked on foot to join him. Many people died, and we buried them where they died. Red Stick Creek scattered at the fort at Prospect Bluff by the thousands. We traveled with father briefly to Pensacola to arrange an agreement with the Spanish officials, but we were sent back to Prospect Bluff as the British retreated from Pensacola following a battle with the Americans. We stayed at the fort at Prospect Bluff and made plans with a group of Seminoles who trusted my father's prediction of a bad future in the white people's ways. British Colonel Nichols and Captain Woodbine gathered a large army of warriors and planned for battle, but the British and Americans signed a treaty. The war was over for the British, but the war was not over for our people. Colonel Nichols remained committed to the Seminole and Creek cause. He arranged a big meeting of many warriors on a hill near Chattahoochee. The meeting was to sign an agreement among themselves which would void other treaties and land distributions by Creeks to the Americans prior to the British and American treaties. The chiefs at the meeting chose my father to travel to England. He and my brother Earl left in the spring of 1815 to present these agreements to King George. As they traveled to England, we settled a new home near the springs of Waka. Spring of 1817, my 14th year, my father returned from England and learned of the destruction at Prospect Bluff and of the resources that had been set aside for the Red Stick offensive in Spanish Florida. My brother Earl stayed behind in England and was promised a good education. I was relieved he did not return, as those loyal to my father began attacking American soldiers and settlers that year. I was told of the battles by British officer Mr. Ambrister, who visited our home in Wakala. He and I became friendly, but I was too young for a man of his age. I enjoyed his company, and we went to Fort St. Mark's, and I visited the daughters of the Spanish commander there. The battles continued. In winter of that year, my father led several attacks on American forts and settlements along the Apalachicola. That winter was very cold, and the night skies were again bright with signs from the ancestors warning of changes to come. In 1818, when I was 15 years old, a young American soldier named Duncan McCrimmon was captured in the spring by my father's forces. I witnessed him tied to a stake to be killed. His youth and fear struck a chord of sadness in me. I asked my father to spare his life. He told me it was not his decision, but gave me permission to ask the warrior who was going to kill Duncan to spare his life. Reluctantly, the warrior agreed. I asked Duncan if he would be willing to live with us. He quickly agreed, but the elders ordered that he be traded to the Spanish. Duncan was able to escape the Spanish and joined a group led by the American Lieutenant McGeever. They planned to capture my father and his allies. Lieutenant McGeever pretended to be commander of a British ship, and the Greek leaders agreed to meet with him at the ship. The Greeks were captured, and Duncan himself addressed my father to inform him that he was now a prisoner of the United States military. My sister Polly was on her way to visit the ship when the Americans fired on her canoe. At Fort St. Mark's, where Duncan had been traded to the Spanish for a barrel of whiskey, my father and his head warrior Omatlimiko were hanged. Duncan had betrayed my father to his death. My friend, Mr. Ambrister, was also captured and brought to Fort St. Mark's. I watched as the Americans shot him to death as punishment for helping the enemies of the Americans. Our peaceful life at Wakala had come to an end. It was ordered that we be removed to territories west of the Mississippi River. We were forced to walk from Florida to Alabama. We were given very few provisions for the long journey. In summer of 1818, we arrived at Fort Gadsden, which was the refuge we once called Prospect Bluff. Father and our hopes were gone. Before winter of that year, Duncan arrived and boldly asked me to be his wife. I professed to him I did not save your life to become your wife. By 1819, my family and I were again in the Creek Nation of Alabama. I was 16 years of age when I married Potra Hobwithy, a Creek warrior. We lived in a cabin at Hickory Ground. A treaty was signed with the Americans in 1832, but this led to the Greek uprising in 1836, led by Neamatla from my father's days, and young warriors. They fought against settlers who were moving onto Creek lands in large numbers. Nematla was captured by General Thomas Jessup. In 1836, almost 5 years after the treaty was signed, the forced removal of our people began. Again, I was 33 years of age, and along with nearly 2,000 others in Alabama, my children and I were removed from our home and forced to start walking what became known as the Trail of Tears. While we were being removed from our home, my husband Gojar was serving as an enlisted soldier in a regiment of Greeks. They were helping the United States Army contain the Seminoles in Florida. We were forced to walk 12 miles a day for a while. Many days we had no food or water. In October of that year, we camped near the Mississippi River. Boats arrived to take us to Arkansas. From there, those able to walk were forced to walk to Oklahoma. The elders and sick people were taken on steamship. In winter of that year, we arrived at Fort Gibson. We had one blanket, but no food or provisions. Families quickly set about finding a place to build shelters to survive the winter. We received word that my cousin David died fighting with other Greeks. He was fighting with them to protect their lands. I feared my brother Earl would come back to extreme danger. My husband Koshar survived the fight which had taken my cousin's life. In 1837, Koshar boarded a ship to travel west as a deportee. He and 23 men from his regiment who fought on behalf of the Americans against the Seminoles all died of sickness in July on the journey to Oklahoma. When Earl returned to the United States from England, he was placed in jail and died from sickness. I was then 34 years old.
Hugtali oi moment ingus of gateways. Ajajulga otolobi baliostin jagiben moment dobalok juguji. Hugwidagi jinabagan sejayans. Momes hugwidagi duchinan sakis moment. Manidits anianejida. Wajinat bakacha Hitchcock. Ani injukobit legends. Moment amfigida abohunks. Adigat atolabi jagiben heomats. Amfigida atolabi jaraganawa. Bali orstabagani vagan. Wajinat hari iri thobo dogoros. Troga dutchki och athlaquichida bohes iri bodi. Wedisem ja mithlida im hisagidad. Wajinat solidawan hisayijayans. Heomat inokitaways dying. Hithabgad ilathlis moment jatki moment mi jiska juolagi. Sudan abagathlis.